Think about someone you've met who just had this calm, steady energy about them. They weren't trying to prove anything. They spoke at their own pace. They didn't laugh nervously or over-explain themselves. They were just comfortable being who they were. That's it. That's what real confidence looks like from the outside. Where does it come from, though? It comes from having a relationship with yourself that you actually respect. When you're working towards something, when you have values you actually live by, when you can look at your day and feel okay about how you spent it, that builds something inside you that no one can hand you and no one can take away. The reason it's attractive is simple. When a man doesn't need your approval to feel good about himself, he stops being needy in the conversation. He's not fishing for compliments. He's not constantly checking your reaction to see if he's landing well. He's just present. And that kind of presence draws people in naturally. It's also honest. People can feel when someone is performing confidence versus actually having it. There's a groundedness to the real thing that registers even before someone says a word, in how they carry themselves, how they listen, how they respond when something doesn't go their way. Presence over performance. There's a difference between being in a conversation and actually being in a conversation. Most people are physically there but mentally somewhere else, thinking about what to say next, wondering how they're coming across, checking their phone every few minutes. That kind of half attention is something people feel even when they can't put words to it. Presence is the opposite of that. It's when you're fully locked into what's happening right now. Not rehearsing, not performing, just actually listening to what the other person is saying and responding to that, not to some version of the conversation you planned in your head. It sounds simple, but it's genuinely rare. And because it's rare, it stands out. When someone feels like you're really hearing them, not just waiting for your turn to talk, something shifts. They open up more. They start to enjoy the conversation more. They feel like what they're saying actually matters to you. That feeling is powerful, and they're going to associate it with you. This is why putting your phone face down, making real eye contact, and asking follow-up questions that show you were actually listening, these small things hit harder than most men realize. It's not about grand gestures. It's about showing up fully in the small moments. Performance is the enemy of this. When you're performing, trying to seem interesting, trying to be funny, trying to impress, you're not actually there. You're in your own head managing an image. She can feel that too, even if she doesn't call it out. It creates distance instead of connection. The shift from performing to being present is one of the most practical things a man can work on. It costs nothing. It requires no special skill. It just requires deciding that the person in front of you is worth your full attention. Emotional safety matters more than looks. This one surprises a lot of men when they first hear it. We're so conditioned to think attraction is mostly visual, that if you look a certain way, dress a certain way, have a certain physique, that's what does the work. And yes, physical appearance plays a role. Nobody's going to pretend it doesn't. But it's not the whole story, and it's often not even the biggest part of it. What women consistently report, and this lines up with a lot of psychological research, is that how someone makes them feel carries more weight over time than how they look. And one of the most powerful feelings you can create in someone is the feeling that they're safe with you. Safe doesn't mean boring. It doesn't mean passive or pushover. It means she can say something real and not have to worry about being judged for it. It means she can disagree with you and not feel like the whole interaction is going to fall apart. It means she doesn't have to perform a version of herself around you just to keep you interested. That kind of emotional safety is genuinely hard to find. A lot of people have been in situations, friendships, relationships, even family dynamics, where they learn to be careful about what they say, to manage other people's reactions, to edit themselves constantly. When someone comes along who doesn't require all of that, it feels like relief. And relief is attractive. The way you build that is by being consistent, non-reactive, and genuinely non-judgmental in how you listen. When she says something and you don't flinch, don't mock it, don't use it against her later, that registers. Trust gets built in those small moments. Men who understand this stop trying to impress and start trying to create an environment where the other person can just breathe. That's a completely different energy, and people feel it immediately. Curiosity is a superpower. Most people go through their days on autopilot in conversations. They ask the same surface level questions, give the same polite answers, and walk away having learned almost nothing real about the person they just spoke to. It's not because they're bad people, it's just habit. Most social interaction runs on autopilot. Genuine curiosity breaks that pattern, and when it does, people notice immediately. When you're actually curious about someone, not as a technique, but as a real orientation toward the world, it shows in everything. The questions you ask go a layer deeper than expected. Your follow-ups show you were actually listening. You pick up on something small they said and come back to it. That kind of attention makes a person feel like they're genuinely interesting to you, not just someone to fill time with. Here's the psychological part of it. When someone feels interesting around you, they don't just think, that was a good conversation. They think, I feel good around that person. Those two things get wired together. You become associated with that feeling of being seen and valued. That's a connection that builds fast and sticks. It also takes the pressure completely off you. When you're curious, you're not performing. You're not trying to come up with impressive things to say. You're just genuinely interested in what this person is going to say next. That relaxed, open energy is far more attractive than anything rehearsed. Curiosity also signals intelligence in a way that talking about yourself never can. Anyone can talk about their own accomplishments. It takes a sharp, self-assured person to be more interested in your story than in telling their own. The men who are naturally magnetic in conversation aren't usually the most accomplished or the best looking. They're the ones who make you feel like the most fascinating person they've talked to all week. That's a skill. And like any skill, it starts with deciding to actually care. Non-neediness is deeply attractive. This is one of those things that's easy to understand on the surface, but genuinely takes some self-reflection to really get. Because neediness doesn't always look the way people think it does. It's not always obvious. It can show up in very subtle ways that you might not even recognize in yourself. At its core, neediness is seeking validation from someone who hasn't earned the right to give it to you yet. It's checking your phone every 10 minutes waiting for her reply. It's changing your opinion the moment she seems to disagree. It's laughing too hard at things that aren't that funny because you want her to feel like you're on her side. It's small things, but they add up, and they communicate something you don't want to communicate, that her approval matters more to you than your own judgment. And people feel that, not always consciously, but they feel it. There's a kind of low-level pressure that comes from being around someone who needs you to respond a certain way. It's exhausting without being able to name why. The man who doesn't need that validation carries himself differently. He's not watching your face for signs of approval. He's not adjusting his personality in real time based on your reaction. He has a point of view and he holds it with ease. He's warm, he's engaged, but he's also okay if this doesn't go anywhere. That okayness is what makes him interesting. It comes from having a life that already satisfies you. When your sense of self isn't riding on how any one interaction goes, you stop being desperate in conversations. You stop over-investing in people before they've shown you they deserve it. That's not coldness, that's self-respect. And self-respect, when it's genuine, is one of the most quietly attractive things a person can carry into a room. Warmth without desperation. There's a version of being kind and attentive that draws people in. And there's a version that pushes them away. They can look almost identical on the outside, but the energy underneath them is completely different. Learning to tell the difference, in yourself especially, is genuinely important. Warmth is when you're kind, because that's just who you are. You're attentive because you actually care about people. You're generous with your time and your interest because it comes naturally to you. There's no agenda underneath it. You're not being nice to get something back. You're just a warm person, and that comes through. Desperation is when the kindness has a price tag attached to it, even if you never say that out loud. You're doing nice things and quietly keeping score. You're being attentive because you want her to like you. And if she doesn't respond the way you hoped, there's frustration underneath it. That frustration, even when you hide it, leaks out eventually. The person on the receiving end of desperate attention doesn't always know exactly what's off. They just know something feels slightly uncomfortable, like there's an expectation sitting just below the surface of every kind gesture. That feeling makes people want to create distance, not get closer. Real warmth has no strings. It doesn't require a specific response to stay intact. You can be genuinely kind to someone and be completely fine if they don't reciprocate in the way you hoped. That kind of giving, without needing anything back, is actually rare and people recognize it when they feel it. The way to get there is honest. You have to check your own motives. Are you being kind because it's who you are, or because you're hoping it buys you something? That's not always a comfortable question to sit with, but it's the right one. Authenticity beats strategy. Every time, there's an entire industry built around teaching men strategies for attraction, scripts to memorize, techniques to deploy, ways to position yourself, time your responses, create artificial tension. Some of it is packaged cleverly, but underneath most of it is the same flawed assumption that you need to be something other than yourself to be wanted. That assumption is worth questioning seriously. Here's what actually happens when you lead with strategy. You might get an initial response. You might even get someone interested for a while. But strategies have a shelf life. At some point, the real you shows up because it always does. And if that person fell for the performance, not the person, the whole thing starts to fall apart. You've essentially attracted someone to a version of you that doesn't exist. Authenticity works differently. When you show up as genuinely yourself, your real sense of humor, your actual opinions, your honest reactions, you're doing something that feels counterintuitive but works deeply. You're letting people self-select. The ones who are drawn to the real you stay. The ones who aren't, leave. And that's not a failure. That's the system working correctly. There's also something that happens internally when you stop performing. You relax. And a relaxed, grounded person is far more attractive than a tense, calculated one. People can feel when someone is comfortable in their own skin. It creates permission for them to be comfortable too. The irony is that every quality talked about in this list, confidence, presence, curiosity, warmth, is really just authentic self-expression done well. You can't fake your way to genuine confidence. You can't perform real presence. These things only work when they're actually true about you. So the real work isn't learning better strategies. It's becoming someone you genuinely respect. Everything else follows from that. We've covered a lot of ground today, and if you've been paying attention, you've probably noticed that none of this was really about tricks. The title brought you here, but the content was always pointing somewhere deeper than that. Every single point we talked about, confidence, presence, emotional safety, curiosity, non-neediness, warmth, authenticity, they all come back to the same thing. Becoming a man who has a real relationship with himself, one who doesn't need external validation to feel whole, one who shows up fully in conversations, in relationships, in life, that's not a quick fix. Nobody's going to pretend it is. But here's what's true. Most men are never taught any of this. They're told to be impressive, to be dominant, to have the right car or the right body or the right lines. And then they wonder why none of it creates the kind of connection they actually want. It's because none of those things touch the real thing. The real thing is who you are when nobody's watching. The standards you hold yourself to when there's no audience. The way you treat people when there's nothing to gain from it. That character, built quietly, over time, is what eventually becomes undeniable to the people around you. Attraction at its core is not about manipulation or performance. It's about becoming someone whose presence genuinely adds something to the lives of the people he meets. Someone who makes others feel seen, safe, and interesting just by being in the room. That version of you already exists. It just needs the noise cleared away, the insecurity, the performance, the chasing, for it to come through clearly. Work on the inside. Let the outside take care of itself. That's the whole message. Everything else is just details.